with all the uncertainty now around AstraZeneca's COVID-19 shot in the country. Have our vaccine hopes dwindled? We're joined by the Director for the Vaccines and Infectious Diseases Analytical Research Unit at WITS University. He's a Professor of Vaccinology, Shabir Madhi. Prof, good morning, and thank you very much for your time this morning. Last night, you were saying that these are disappointing results, but just reading some of the stuff that you and your colleagues have said, the mutation of this virus is something that we're going to be battling with going forward, because that's what we're learning right now. Is it all doom and gloom?
It's certainly not doom and gloom. And although the AstraZeneca vaccine wasn't founded to protect against mild and moderate infection in a relatively young age group with very minimal comorbidities, I think the experience that we've had with a Novavax vaccine, which also evaluated it in a similar sort of age group demographic, in fact showed 60% protection against mild to moderate infection. In addition to which, as you are aware, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine that was evaluated in South Africa against the variant again showed close on to 90% protection against severe disease. Now, the AstraZeneca vaccine and the Johnson & Johnson vaccine use very similar sort of technology in terms of the development of the vaccine, in addition to which they're also very comparable with regard to the immune responses that they induce. So although in a young population with very low prevalence of comorbidities who wouldn't be at risk of developing severe disease, we didn't show protection, even for AstraZeneca vaccine, based on the experience for the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, I think we've still got vaccines available to us that are highly effective in at least protecting against severe disease and death. What we don't have at hand are the type of vaccines that we want to be able to protect against more mild illness, which is going to be important in terms of trying to maintain interruption of the chain of transmission of the virus.
Okay, just to understand, can AstraZeneca vaccine be used for anything at this stage?
Certainly, I think there's still opportunity to use the AstraZeneca vaccine, but it can't be for your average healthcare worker that's not at high risk of developing severe disease. It needs to be a more nuanced approach that we repurpose the AstraZeneca vaccine for healthcare workers at high risk in the absence of any other vaccine being available. And the same thing goes for other individuals in the community. People that are at high risk of developing severe COVID-19, we're likely to experience a resurgence in a few months from now. And it is better to get a vaccine that is known to be safe at the least, even if so there might be some uncertainty in terms of just how well it's going to work against severe disease, than not to get anything. So if we say that we're not going to use the AstraZeneca vaccine, unfortunately what that means for South Africa is that we're not going to get substantial quantities of vaccine, at least until the resurgence arrives. And once the resurgence is upon us, it's too late to start acting in terms of getting people immunized. So I still believe that even the AstraZeneca vaccine, together with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, at least allows us to immunize a target group that are at high risk of developing severe disease.
So it's not a wasted effort to have acquired AstraZeneca. It's also not a waste of money, is it?
I think anyone that says that it's a wasted effort and waste of money, unfortunately doesn't understand the dynamics that go behind trying to secure COVID-19 vaccines. If South Africa wants to wait for the results of the perfect vaccine, then we would be waiting around about till 2023 and 2024 before we get any vaccine that becomes available to us that is proven to protect against the full spectrum of COVID-19. Every country that is procuring vaccine is procuring it at risk. We've just been unfortunate in South Africa in that this variant has evolved largely because of the large amount of infection that took place among South Africans during the course of the first wave. That is one of the major contributors to this variant having evolved. So waiting for the perfect vaccine, then you might just as well close shop, because essentially you're not going to get that probably into 2023, 2024, by which time we would have experienced multiple additional resurgences.
Yeah, most medication, especially vaccines, have an expiry date. The current batch of AstraZeneca that has arrived on our shores, that is being safely kept in the appropriate facilities, can it be used for beyond a certain period, or after its expiry date, it's gone? And within that window, do you think we should have tried to secure the Johnson & Johnson one?
So I think we need to be trying to secure work in South Africa. That includes the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. It includes the Novavax vaccine. In terms of the expiry date of the AstraZeneca vaccine, it is possible for a company to do additional testing, what is known as stability testing, to see if they can extend the shelf life of that particular vaccine. And those are things which I think the Department of Health are currently engaging with the Serum Institute of India. But 2 months is a long time, and we could easily use that 1 million doses of vaccine in this 2 months period, provided that we repurpose who we're wanting to target with these vaccines. And like I mentioned, the focus now needs to be about protecting against severe disease and against death. And that means it's not necessarily only healthcare workers that need to be included in phase 1, but rather anyone that is at high risk of developing severe disease should be offered the vaccine so that we can use these vaccines, which, like I said earlier, I do believe still has got potential in terms of protecting against severe COVID-19 at least.
Okay, so the rollout to the healthcare workers, the frontline workers of the AstraZeneca vaccine is now temporarily halted. What happens in the meantime while the other matters that you've raised are being addressed?
So what the minister announced last night is that there is going to be access to some Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which probably will come into the country during the course of February. And I think the delay in terms of the immunization of healthcare workers is something that is going to be just a delay of about 2 to 3 weeks, which in a way, unfortunately for South Africa, because of where we are with the current trajectory of the second wave, we're very much on a downward, we're very much on a decline in terms of this current wave. And consequently, the urgency to be able to vaccinate healthcare workers right now has sort of been reduced compared to what it was, as an example, in the beginning of January, when we were faced with a massive resurgence. So we probably have got some breathing space now, between now and the next resurgence, by when we should ensure that all healthcare workers are definitely immunized. But as an immediate start, it will be the Johnson & Johnson vaccine that will likely become available for use.
Now, going forward, as a vaccinologist, we read from your comments from yesterday and your colleagues saying that, I mean, as you said as well, unfortunately, viruses mutate. Should we be bracing ourselves for different variants going forward? Should you, as scientists, be advising pharmaceutical companies to really ramp up the composition, if something like that exists, of their vaccines to anticipate more mutations into the future? Or is that not possible to do?
Well, it is possible, and pharmaceutical companies and other scientists are already working on the next generation of vaccines that would target both the original virus that was circulating, as well as the variant that's currently circulating in South Africa, and a very similar variant that's circulating in Brazil and also evolving in the United Kingdom. But the question then is, once we get a vaccine against that variant and with ongoing immune pressure that the virus is under because of high levels of natural infection, is it not going to mutate further? And even the next generation of vaccines might not be as effective against a new variant that evolves. So we are learning as we go. Each day is a new experience when it comes to COVID-19. And I think based on the current experience, the best plan is to basically assume that the virus is going to continue mutating and that we're going to require probably annual vaccination, at least for individuals at high risk of developing severe disease. So in my mind, at least, to a large extent, we need to recalibrate the manner in which we think about COVID-19 vaccines. It's not going to get us to herd immunity anytime soon. And the frequency that we're going to need to revaccinate, depending on the evolution of the virus, will also need to be reconsidered. It might end up being every year or perhaps even every 2 to 3 years. But we will need to continue studying the virus to see how it's changing, so that we can adapt future vaccines that are more efficacious against new virus mutations that are evolving.
Thank you very much, Professor Madhi, there for your time this morning.